عالحرية ما تساومني أو أنا قف بس ويقضي أعطاني كبير بس وين الحر تساومني وعالحرية ما تساومني يقضي أعطاني بغي التطهير ولا تسلم زادك وفي تاريخك صار التغيير ونقول في تاريخك صار التغيير وقف بس يقضي وطني كبير أما لقيت وسطي وعالحرية ما تساومني وعالحرية ما تساومني وانا قف بس واستيقظ وطني كبير اوقف بس واستيقظ وعالحرية ما تساومني اسمع بس واستيقظ وطني كبير هلا قف بس واستيقظ عالحرية ما تساومني وعن حريتك ما تساومني من الحرية أعظم الشمس والبدر المنير لا تتجزأ شيء يصير مع حريتك أكبر بكتير أو نقول حريتك أكبر بكتير اسمع قف بس واستيقظ استيقظ يا وطني الكبير لما قف بس واستيقظ وعالحرية ما تساومني وعالحرية ما تساومني
Welcome to the Africa team and U.S. Out of Africa Network Shutdown Africa series. I am Dennis Hill, member and co-coordinator of the Africa team, along with Netfa Freeman and Margaret Kimberly. The expansion of U.S. military power across Africa has become a central pillar of contemporary imperialism. Through AFRICOM, NATO partnerships, proxy forces, foreign military bases, security pacts, intelligence strategies, sanctions, and economic coercion, the US and its allies aim to preserve Western dominance while undermining African sovereignty, political autonomy, and self-determined development. Since 2007, AFRICOM has vastly expanded US military activity across the continent under the guise of security, stability, and counterterrorism. Yet this expansion has coincided with rising instability, coups, displacement, proxy wars, foreign occupations, and intensified resource extraction. It is evident, therefore, that rather than fostering peace, Africa serves as an instrument for sustaining a global imperial order reliant on African underdevelopment, military dependence, and neo-colonial rule. For the Black Alliance for Peace, opposition to an entire imperialist system that links militarization abroad with colonial violence, police militarization, surveillance, incarceration, economic warfare, and repression against African Black people within US borders. The struggle against AFRICOM, therefore, cannot be separated from struggles against capitalism, colonialism, Zionism, fascism, and the broader machinery of US-led imperialism. This six-week political education course, organized by the BAP Africa team and the US Out of Africa Network, seeks to deepen our collective understanding of the political economy of imperialism, the history of US intervention in Africa, and the strategic role AFRICOM plays within the broader imperial project. Through historical analysis, testimony from organizers across Africa and the diaspora, case studies, and collective discussion, participants will examine both the mechanisms of imperial domination and the growing resistance emerging across the continent. The Black Alliance for Peace is an alliance that seeks to recapture and redevelop the historic anti-war, anti-imperialist, and pro-peace positions of the radical Black movement. Through educational activities, organizing, and movement support, organizations and individuals in the alliance will work to oppose both militarized domestic state repression and the policies of destabilization, subversion, and the permanent war agenda of the US state globally. BAP created the US Out of Africa Network to serve as the organizing arm of the campaign, US Out of Africa Shut Down AFRICOM. This work emerges out of the efforts of the Coalition Against US Foreign Military Bases, an organization BAP was instrumental in building that is committed to closing the over 800 US military bases established outside the United States. We have developed the US Out of Africa Network as the organizing arm of the US Out of Africa Shut Down AFRICOM campaign. We demand the right to sovereignty and self-determination for African people, and this must include the closing of all US NATO military bases. So welcome, everyone. For our first session, we're going to be taking a deep dive into US and Western interventions over time. And our panelists today are Essam ElKorgli and Maurice Carney. Essam Abdulrasul Boubacar ElKorgli is a Libyan doctoral researcher at the University of Illinois at Urbana Champaign, researching imperialism, ideology, and education with a primary focus on Libya. He serves as the assistant educator to the Middle East Critique Journal and member of the Global Pan-African Movement. His academic writing includes various articles on citizenship education, labor and teachers' history in Libya, and imperialist terrorism, in Northern Africa. He writes frequently about media, propaganda, ideology, and imperialism in the Pan-African websites, Black Agenda Report and Pam Bazooka News. And Maurice Carney is one of the co-founders of Friends of the Congo and currently serves as the organization's executive director. He has pursued a Pan-African solidarity mission for the past 25 years to build a global constituency in support of the Congolese people as they strive to fulfill Lumumba's vision of a free and liberated Congo. So right now, we will turn to Essam to start us off. And we will be following that with a segment from Maurice, and then questions from our Political Education Committee, Rose Brewer. Thank you. Over to you, Essam.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and really commend all the work that the Black Alliance for Peace does. Educating the masses in the US and across what Pan-African is called Global Africa. In my short remarks of roughly 15 minutes, I want to highlight how the US has been invested into getting its foothold in Northern Africa, particularly in Libya, when Libya was more sovereign than it is right now. And what are the implications of it? Because what we should be coming out of this all political education, not just to understand that AFRICOM is bad, which it is, but how is it bad and how does it look like on the ground? So hence the title of Imperialism, AFRICOM, and the Long Array of Western Interventionism. This is the brief overview. I will highlight what is meant by an empire, and when people talk about like the existence of foreign military presence on the African continent from other agreements. So we should focus on the US, how it's distinctly different from everyone else, and how it's actually detrimental to the sovereignty of African continent, which makes the US this unipolar empire. And then I'll focus more on Libya and walk us through the history of how it has intervened in Libya, and then it expanded its presence after the destruction of Libya in 2011. And why I think history is important to understand is that when you look at the anthem of the US Marine, they have this line that says, "From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli." And obviously there are two Tripolis on shores. One is in Lebanon, but they're talking particularly about the one in Libya, which is the capital of Libya, Tripoli. If you are aware, back in 1806, I believe, I might be incorrect, the US tried to come and start to establish its military presence in the Mediterranean, roughly 200 years ago. And they fought with the Libyans / Ottoman Empire at the time, and their ship, the USS Philadelphia, that you can see here on the right from that painting in 1897, it was struck down, and the mast of the ship, if I ever invite you to Libya, my home country, I will take you to downtown Tripoli, and you'll see that the mast of the ship is still hung up there. And the idea of it is that the Libyan state puts it up there to remind us that the territorial waters of Libya and its sovereignty are something that we should always strive for. Notwithstanding that Libya today's sovereignty has been undermined by the existence of AFRICOM. And so if you walk in Tripoli, you'll see it, it's there, and then you also see the description of the event. So when we say about the US as an empire, a lot of people in the early 2000s after 9/11, they started to talk about US as an empire because it goes and attacks countries and that's it. So there was a lot of kind of militarism as the expression of imperialism and an empire. But there is something that is more innate to empire than just military prowess and force, and this is where the work of Michael Parenti, he wrote this book in 1995, I believe, called Against Empire. And he's talking about how the US, through the use of the sword and the dollar, the bombs, the collaboration with NATO and everything, and the coercive measures, the economic ones that they use in order to force countries to acquiesce to the demands of US imperialism, this is why it's such a detrimental to the sovereignty of countries and the development of the well-being of the people across much of the world. And then there's another book in 2019 called How to Hide an Empire, and really details how many US military bases that exist across the world, and how even, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, it wasn't just Pearl Harbor that attacked, also other tiny minor islands, that shows really how much the US is. They say, oh, we just have this mainland US, 51 states or so, 50 states, and that's it. But no, their presence are across the whole world. So in Libya, if you ever travel to Libya, you will be landing at this airport called the Maitiga International Airport. And this is a picture I took when I was there in Libya in 24, and I'm just reminiscing. So before 1969, this road used to be blocked to Libyans. There used to be a US military base in Libya that when Libya got its independence in 1951, they said, well, you don't have oil, you don't have anything, because Libya at the time had nothing. So we will give you money, you give us a military base. So the US had the largest military base outside of the US at the time, and outside of NATO countries. And it was operating in the region, in Africa, to support the Portuguese fascists, to support the Algerian, the French occupation in Algeria. It was like a military base for the continuation of colonialism, and this is how it should be sought. And I think Amilcar Cabral also said it, that he said during the struggle against Portuguese colonialism in Guinea-Bissau, weapons were flying not directly from Portugal, they were coming from fellow African countries, namely Libya, which had the largest US military base. So in 1967, this is before 1969 when Gaddafi took power, Egypt, when it was attacked by the Zionists in that war, and they lost the Sinai Peninsula, they were attacked from Libya, actually. So not the Zionists attacked from Libya, but the Americans, they attacked the Egyptians from Libya. So the existence of a foreign military base in Libya, meaning a British one, we had two, British and American, they were supporting the Zionists in Egypt, and they were bombing Egyptian and Arab troops. So so this is what Jamal Abdel Nasser said, well, we hope that Libya increases its national wealth through this British American aid, but we also wish for Libya that it removes foreign military bases. So it was against Pan-Arabism and Pan-Africanism to have these foreign military bases. So in 1969, when it took place, Gaddafi, the first thing that he did was to start negotiating with the Americans and the British through an ultimatum. He said, we have a population of 2 million people, and all of them are willing to fight you to remove these bases. This is something non-negotiable. Please leave, or we're going to start a war of liberation against you. So the Americans and the British left in 1970. And then the land was redistributed, like the end of Italian settler colonialists who stayed after the independence. Libya nationalized oil, and also contributed to the reclamation of the Sinai Peninsula in 1973. So Libya, it shifted. Now, there's the war of propaganda that comes at the same time that Libya's dictatorship, it's not developing and whatever. In 1979, when there was the heat of the Carter administration trying to force these Northern African countries to normalize like and everything, there were delegates coming from the US to Libya to tame Libya and ask it, can you please calm down and be more like into negotiation and pacification and so forth, because Libya was radical at the time. So 1979, look at this propaganda. They say when they landed in the airport in Libya in 1979, the Americans noted evidence of progress and change in the decade since when he left Libya in 1969, particularly in the airport, port, and new roads. Newsom commented on his travels to Libya as an ambassador, congratulated Gaddafi and the prime minister at the time, Jaloud. And then look at the second one. Although we may laugh at propaganda against Libya and the United States media, Newsom can see for himself the progress that has been made. As he can see, the US doesn't reflect the true picture. So there is always this propaganda that's being purported out there. So one of the propaganda, and I mentioned this tangential story, in 2024, I was traveling back to Libya from O'Hare and 4 a.m. On a lift, and so the Lyft driver asked me, so where are you flying to? I said, Libya. And I asked him, do you know anything about Libya? He said, yeah, I know it very well. And I asked, how come? He said, I've actually been there. I was like, when? And then he said, in the 80s. At the time, Libya and Reagan were very antagonistic to one another. I was like, interesting. So what did you do in Libya? He's like, well, I was in the army. And I was like, interesting. So what? You weren't physically in Libya. And then I told him, you were in 1985 there, right? And then he said, yeah, I was not physically in Libya. He was on the Mediterranean fighting with the against the Libyans, with the US military. Why? Because Reagan wanted to violate the territorial waters of Libya and do military skirmishes in the area. So I told him, and I remember, so he never stepped a foot in Libya. And then I asked, and then he switched the topic to telling me that I don't know what you as a Libyan think about Gaddafi, but I think he was a great man. What he did to Libya was fantastic. And I'm surprised that why is it that you think these things, but at the same time went and tried to bomb the country in 1985 and have disputes. He said, it's always been a policy of the United States military and also the US is try to destroy any sovereign socialist country and make it look as a failed weak and incompetent state, such that people in the United States don't want socialism to come here, or don't want the model of development that is existing, be it in Nicaragua and Cuba and the Soviet Union, whatever, to come to the United States. So I was like, so you have changed after that? He's like, I matured and I completely regret what I did. But this is what the US does, right? So it tries to make it harder for countries to develop, make them worried about war and territorial violations and so forth, such that they shift from economic development and feeding their masses to militarism and scaremongering and so forth. So given the limited time that I have written a couple of pieces, and I'll share the links. And I'm sure that if you follow Black Alliance for Peace, you know Black Agenda Report quite well. These pieces about understanding Libya, how it transformed from being sovereign country to more of a weak, measly country obedient to the US after 2011, and it's called Centering Imperialism in Libya. implications for the African continent. And then I wrote a couple months later, The De-Africanization and Re-Europeanization of Libya, the Political Economy of NATO's Legacy in Libya. And it talks about how anti-Blackness was weaponized in Libya in order to allow for the NATO to intervene and de-Africanize and make Libya more of an Arab/Mediterranean country than African. So, so when Libya was destroyed in 2011, obviously I highly recommend that you go and check out the WikiLeaks emails of Hillary Clinton when they said they want to destroy Libya's influence in North Africa, weaken it militarily, and also supplant the gold dinar. All of these were mentioned. And then also expand the French and American presence, military presence in the Sahel countries. All of these objectives were achieved, right? Now the Alliance of Sahel States is combating that slowly. But within Libya, just to remember that when they have started their operations, the AFRICOM after 2011, particularly in 2016, it has worked as a kind of a gangster operation on the African continent, or as Comrade Ajam Mubarak calls US gangsterism, what they're doing right across the world. So I know a lot of us have watched probably the World Cup. We're thinking of the Cape Verde as their story is amazing, especially their goalkeeper. But I'm also reminded of what Cape Verde did in 2021. If you recall, Alex Saab, who was a Venezuelan/Colombian diplomat, was helping to transfer aid from South Africa to Iran, then to Venezuela because of the blockade on the sanctions on Venezuela at the time. And his plane was intercepted by AFRICOM, downed in Cape Verde, and then he was extradited to the US. So what is the AFRICOM's role in all of this? All right, it has military bases across the African continent, it kidnaps people, and then prosecutes them based on their own laws, the same way that they have done today to Nicolas Maduro and his wife. So in Libya, they have slowly created these governments that are transitional governments that we Libyans, we didn't vote for. Just remember, we've never elected any of the current people that are in power today in Libya. They have been parachuted by the United Nations, right? If you have been following Black Agenda Report and follow what's happening in Haiti and Libya are so alike. So I know this complicated kind of timeline, but I just wanted to highlight that in Libya, it's still contested their existence a bit because some people are aligning more with Russia, such that AFRICOM reconnaissance planes, particularly in 2019, if you see here in the middle, their plane was shot down, and also in 2022 in August. Actually, yeah, just 4 years ago exactly, they were shot down. But what does AFRICOM do in Libya? They have kidnapped, for example, a Libyan citizen from his home with collaboration with Libyan security forces, and they extradited him to the US to face trials for the so-called Lockerbie bombing that took place in Scotland in 1988. So please do check that out. But then at the same time, they're collaborating with security forces in Libya, and they say such that in April this year, they had a massive troops, the US and more different African countries training on the Mediterranean, and so the Department of War, Pete Hegseth, and everything, they announced that it was a great success, and they have had a lot of countries working together, and this is kind of the synchronization of military forces all together in order to show that US and its puppet regimes on the African continent are working closely together to kind of fight terrorism and so forth, while we know who the actual terrorists are. So in my last remark, this is the larger meaning of AFRICOM. And what does it mean to have it operate on the African continent? When you have an empire like the US comes and says, let's work as collaborators on a military project or whatever, it's never as equals. It's always through, I put my military base, you don't put your military base in my place. Maybe you get training and you have to pay for it at my military bases, but it's an expansion of US empire. It's a compromise of sovereignty intelligence. When they know your equipment, they know every single thing about you. Once they want to overthrow something or infiltrate your country, they're able to do that. They have bombed so many civilians in so many places, and there's complete lack of accountability. Similar with the British exists in Kenya, for example. And when an actual uprising takes place, like the one, for example, in Bahrain in 2011, the security forces of the Florida police, if you read Vijay Prashad's book, Arab Spring, Libyan Winter, it talks about how Florida police forces to Bahrain to go and stifle the protesters there. So it's any alternative is ending. And lastly, they have published a month ago, I believe, at the end of June, early July, a new operation called Drago, and it's shifted from psychological operation of media and propaganda, and in a way, kind of how to choose color schemes and how to use psychological warfare, to now what they call cognitive warfare. If you're following what's happening with Iran has mastered the art of cognitive warfare as well, because what they have been doing, they have been talking to the American masses through the language of Lego videos. What the US have been trying to do for many years, and they have particularly targeting a lot of countries like Cuba, Libya, and so forth, is the use of artificial intelligence as a tool to look at people's and try to destruct them from within through large language models and AI. Pambazuka News, where I tend to write sometimes, if I'm not writing for Black Agenda Report, I write for them. Recently, Horace Campbell, who's also friends of Black Alliance for Peace, wrote this recent article I highly recommend, Hubris of White Supremacy and the Limits of U.S. Psychological Information Warfare in Global Africa. So I know this was a lot of information. I apologize for going over time. I just want to say thank you, and I'll be happy to address any questions that the panelists and the attendees have. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Essam. That was incredible. Just so much information there. I have like 4 pages in on notes. Thankfully, we have the slides, and we'll be sharing those to everyone who came through after the session. Thank you again. Really appreciate it. So just also a reminder too, after we're done with our next speaker, we will go to a selection of questions that were put together by the PE committee. I'll be handing that over to our BAPA comrade, Rose Brewer. And then we'll go to Q&A from attendees. So if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A. We will make sure we keep an eye on that, so that way we can pass those on. Alrighty, so now we are going to move to Maurice Carney. I already gave you his bio, but he's been on many a webinar from Black Alliance for Peace. So welcome back, Maurice. Good to have you, and over to you.
Oh my goodness. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Having a problem here with my technology, because the headset doesn't allow me to start the video. So I'm going to try and do it without the video, and hopefully you're still able to.
No worries.
Are you still able to hear me okay?
Mm-hmm, yes.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Black Alliance for Peace, for having us back to be a part of this discussion. Really a long-running discussion for almost over two decades now, around the launch of the United States Africa Command. Friends of the Congo, we're based in Washington, D.C. And being at the heart of the empire, where infrastructure is for the intellectual underpinning of the empire, we get to see upfront how policies are made, come to fruition, and then their resultant impact on comrades in Africa and the rest of the global South. Africa Command is a product of one of the main think tanks here in Washington, the Heritage Foundation, that developed the blueprint for the Africa Command. When when I first arrived in DC, it was in the early 1990s, and came to DC because professors and comrades here that this is a place to be it's the information capital of the world. It's where decisions are made that affect the rest of the world. And I had attended an event at the Heritage Foundation. And the first event that I attended at the Heritage Foundation was to listen to a presentation by none other than Jonas Savimbi. For those of you who may not be familiar, he was the main CIA asset in Angola, representing UNITA. And it struck me that Savimbi was here as he was in the middle of the war, found his guerrilla warfare against the Santos and the. As he was in the middle of the war, he would find time to come to Washington to consult with the policymakers here in Washington. So very early on, it became clear that what we saw on the African continent, the different conflicts, different coups, the support for dictatorial regimes. If you remember, look at Savimbi, for example. You look at Savimbi, for example, he was the conduit to Savimbi. Savimbi was Joseph Desiré Mobutu in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. That Mobutu would funnel resources, whether it's money, military equipment, you name it. And that's why in 1996, when the United States was ready to get rid of Mobutu, and they rallied different neighboring countries, Rwanda, for example, and Uganda, we saw that along with those two countries, Angola, under Dos Santos, joined the 1996 invasion of the Congo. Now, the reason for Angola joining the 1996 invasion of the Congo was because Dos Santos wanted to cut the umbilical cord that connected Savimbi to Mobutu, who was the primary conduit for the CIA. And this is important to know, because you saw that Angola exercising, even though they were in collaboration with the agents of imperialism, the Kagames of Rwanda, the Musevenis of Uganda, they saw their strategic interests in getting rid of Mobutu in an attempt to break the back of UNITA, and which it successfully did, because it was after that the removal of Mobutu that we things start to open up, where Angola, Dos Santos under Angola was able to eventually break the back of Savimbi and enter into peace talks, and that's particularly noteworthy because when in 1998 there was a second invasion of the Congo by Rwanda and Uganda, backed again by the United States. We saw that this time Angola did not join in. Angola supported Laurent Desire Kabila in the Congo because Kabila represented in alignment, was of course a member of the Southern African Development Community, in alignment with SADC. You saw Angola come to the side of Kabila and the Congo in order to push back on Rwanda and Uganda. So I gave that brief background in order to share that these policies that come out of Washington have dire consequences for the continent. So when we saw in 2007 and early 2008, where then President Bush took trip to Africa, and this is before officially announcing AFRICOM, and floated the idea of an African command. And at that time, the continent was relatively unified. There was, as I recall, there was only one African president that was in agreement with the idea of the establishment of an African command under the leadership of the United States, and that was Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia. And the climate was such that no matter where the African leader was on the spectrum, whether it's a conservative to liberal or leftist, they were all in an agreement when President Bush first floated the idea of, or tried anyways, to bring the African leaders into the fold. Now, AFRICOM was officially launched October 1, 2008, and a few months, or at least a month or so later, we saw that President Obama was elected in the United States. Now, many people, like reporters and analysts, were saying, well, okay, we have a Republican president who launched AFRICOM, engaged with Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense, and Dick Cheney, and all these neoconservatives, right? So you had journalists, analysts say, well, now you have Obama coming into the office. Surely he's not going to continue Bush policy. Your command. You have many people who are organizing and presenting President Obama as, someone who is, even in his book, he's made reference inheriting the civil rights tradition. Dr. King's and Malcolm X. But what we found, and we're very clear about it, that when it comes to U.S. foreign policy, whether it's a Democrat, it's a Republican, the white president, a woman president, a black president, empire goes on. But what was particularly striking about his presidency is that he doubled down on AFRICOM, where we saw AFRICOM, at that time we had launched with a number of organizations in Washington, what we call Resist AFRICOM. And, some people, as necessarily ours, we saw that he doubled down exponentially. There's up to, from his tenure in power, AFRICOM increased some 2,000%, where whether it's military bases, special forces, we saw throughout the continent an expansion of U.S. military presence. And of course, and I wasn't on for the previous speaker, our brother from Libya, but I'm sure he laid out how it is that 2011, the Obama leadership with had, I believe then, either Susan Rice was at, she was at that time, she was a U.S. ambassador to the United Nations before heading to the National Security Council. You had Hillary Clinton. They all joined in with Sarkozy of France. So the AFRICOM NATO alliance was responsible for the overthrow, the dismantling of Gaddafi, dismantling of Libya, and of course we see today the continued destabilization of the Sahel region as a result of that overthrow. And make no mistake about it, it wasn't solely a question of decapitating Gaddafi, but it was also a matter of stopping in its track the let's say, this current era revolutionary push for a unified African continent. It's not a stretch to argue that Gaddafi represented the historic Casablanca wing of Pan-Africanism. We know that at the time of the formation of the African Union, Gaddafi was at the forefront of pushing for a unified continent right away, as soon as possible. Then you had the conservative forces. You could really put them in the Monrovia camp, the likes of Yoweri Museveni, likes of Thabo Mbeki, who were arguing for a gradual regional approach before arriving at a continent, fully continental Pan-African, unified Pan-African structure in the spirit of Kwame Nkrumah, spirit of the Casablanca wing Pan-Africanism. So the blow against Gaddafi wasn't solely the impact and the fallout wasn't the destabilizing of really the destruction of Libya, the destabilizing of the Sahel, but also the stopping in its tracks of the ardent Pan-African push that Gaddafi represented. Not certainly not in rhetoric, but in actual concrete dollars, being the #1 contributor to the African Union, supporting different African countries in their efforts to rid themselves of debt, in cutting out, launching a satellite that would cut out France out of Africa's telecommunications grab that it had, rid France of hundreds of millions of dollars that he was making by routing African communications through France and in Europe. Push for a unified currency. So what we saw in the AFRICOM NATO alliance was a direct attack against the progress in Pan-Africanism. Now, as fate would have it, we see that the fallout in the Sahel has produced the alliance of Sahel states, where they are now carrying on the tradition of that Casablanca way, and also really drawing up an influence all appeal to us, the Revolutionary Handbook for Warfare, that for an all-African army, starting, of course, in the Sahel nations of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. So, just to wrap up with the time, that as we resist AFRICOM, it's really important that we continue to resist. That has called for the shutdown of AFRICOM. That equally important that we also make an affirmative stance in drawing up on the Casablanca tradition, in drawing up of what Nkrumah articulated for an all-African military, in supporting those revolutionary governments that are on that path. So that would be the appeal that we would make. That we resist AFRICOM. We also affirmatively support those revolutionary governments that are trying to develop ultimately African military presence in the spirit of Nkrumah's Pan-Africanism. But thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to be a part of this discussion.
Thank you so much for that super informative deep dive into the history of the beginnings, the continuation of the AFRICOM. Really appreciate it. We're now going to hand it over to team comrade Rose, and she will lead the question and answer section. Over to you, Rose.
Thank you, and thank you to our panelists, Essam and Maurice. Outstanding presentations, deep dive into history. The PE team certainly have a few questions for both of you. You can respond to all of them, hopefully, or maybe one. But let's start with, how would you describe the people's disposition toward AFRICOM and or the U.S. military presence in your area? Is it welcomed, opposed, indifferent? There are some subtopics to this. Has the perception of AFRICOM changed over time? How much any differing perceptions correlate to class status identity? So you can break that up or you can respond to one or another of them. Conrad, Essam, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, no, thank you for that nuanced question, because say just generally Libyans what they think, it's very complicated, and you brought in the class dynamic, so I think that's very important. I would say generally Libyans, they are nostalgic for the sovereignty that we used to have, such that there was no foreign military presence in Libya. Right now, Turkey has presence, which is a NATO country. Italy has presence, Britain, UAE, which is detrimental in Sudan, and also the US. Most Libyans I speak to, if not all, they're against existence of all of them. So the question is then, how come that these entities exist in Libya? The question then comes, it's a class. You notice that a particular class, let's say Libyans who are pro-US historically, and they were in support of the NATO intervention in 2011, they say, well, they're going to help us build our military. They're going to help us support, our sovereignty, which is very interesting. You support your sovereignty by undermining your own sovereignty. This is one thing. The other part is that they say, well, Libya is under international embargo of weapons, so we need somebody else to do the protection for us. So they find the idea of the AFRICOM itself, in order to create legitimacy for its existence in Libya and elsewhere, supposedly filling the security vacuum. They have destroyed the military that used to protect the country, and now they said, now we're going to come and protect you from other things. So it's a very class thing. So Libyans themselves, generally, the public is against it. Upper class people who tend to have alliances with the British historical presence in Libya and American, they would be in favor. But the elite who are currently in power and parachuted by the CIA and the United Nations mission, they are also in cahoots with the AFRICOM. So if it were to be put on a ballot, popular direct democracy, ask the Libyans, what do you think? Should we have AFRICOM collaborate with the Libyan military? Should we have foreign military bases? And we put that, I'm sure that the Libyans will all say no. So I think that's how to simplify it a bit.
You know, but quite informative. Conrad, please, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Sorry.
Okay, we can hear you. We can hear you. Okay. Should I repeat those questions? Or you're good?
No, I have the question. Thank you. And question that you ask has to be taken into account with the regional dynamics unfolding in the Great Lakes. It's not just a question about the Congo. There's a survey group in the Congo called Ebutili, and they did a survey recently where they sought the opinion of the Congolese public in regard to their sentiment on the U.S. I think some 80% or so were in support of the U.S. I don't know about their survey sample, but in the Congo, less than 20% of the population has access to internet. Less than 20% has access to electricity. So when surveys are done, they're skeptical. But however, if you look at the regional dynamics, right, where we see there's been a 30-year war of aggression and plunder against the Congo by Rwanda and Uganda, and with the backing of the United States. So Rwanda gets training from from Africa. Paul Kagame is deeply in bed with the Pentagon. Uganda, they're deeply in bed with the Pentagon, U.S. military sector. They get equipment during the U.S. wars in Western Asia. Uganda sends its soldiers to fight with the United States. Did that in Iraq, and they've even said that they'll into sending their soldiers to pacify Gaza under this whatever peace plan that Trump is about. So, and Tshisekedi himself, he's welcome AFRICOM as an effort to, interestingly enough, he believes to combat Rwanda and the M23 soldiers. Not only has he done that, he's hired former Blackwater founder Eric Prince to the tune of $750 million to provide security. There was a battle that took place in east of the Congo in a place called Uvira, where Rwanda and M23 captured territory there. And it was Eric Prince and his mercenaries that went in to beat them back. So in addition to that, we see that not just AFRICOM, but the Israeli Defense Forces, Tshisekedi, the president of Congo, has brought them in prior to October 2023 in order to train Congolese soldiers. So if you take into consideration the realities of the region, right, where the region is under the leadership and the grasp of neo-colonial leaders, right? It's so vital for us to look at the heart of the African continent through that prism. There's a neo-colonial leadership in Kigali, Rwanda. Neo-colonial leadership in Kampala, Uganda. Neo-colonial leadership in Kinshasa, DRC. And this neo-colonial leadership is tethered to the West, right? Whether it's inviting AFRICOM in to pursue whatever interests AFRICOM has in the Great Lakes region, whether it's being an outpost, sort of refuse for Trump administration's sending of refugees and asylees that it doesn't want in the United States, they're open to that as well. So that when it comes to that part of the continent, it's that neo-colonialship that dominates. Now, the people,
Conrad, we're about at time.
Okay, sorry.
So,
I'll stop there. I think you get the picture in terms of the openness.
We may return to this depending on the questions that come from the audience. And actually, we had a second question, but it looks like we have at least a few questions. And let's see what we have here. First of all, we have the question, what does resistance look like from the Black identifying Libyans in the face of domestic and Black violence and Western imperialism? And let me just take a look at the other ones and see how they might converge. Actually, we have a number of them. Let's go with that first one and a second one for you, Conrad, Essam, referencing the psychological and cognitive warfare. What are your thoughts on this difference specifically around their impact? Why don't you respond to those two?
Sounds good. So recently, I will post it in the chat. Recently, an article about understanding anti-Blackness in Libya from anti-imperialist analysis, and it's with the Pen and Machete Anti-Imperialist Scholars Collective, where I detail. A lot of us heard in 2017 or even saw that there's slave markets in Libya, and that if you're a Black in Libya, you will just going to be put into slavery. While I recognize that migrants who pass through Libya, they experience horrific conditions under the context of externalization of U.S. borders onto Libya, that it is more complicated than just saying Libya is just a slave market. For example, like I don't know if it appears to you, but one side of my family is all Black, right? So my grandma's side is Blacks from southern Libya. Libyans themselves, they have what is similar to South Africa. It's the Afrophobia. It is not necessarily a fear of Africans, but the Africans from other parts of Africa come into Libya, and then they take jobs. The same nationalist rhetoric that is exclusionary. But at the same time, European Union, they say, oh, instead of having detention centers in Europe, we'll give money to Libyans who are sanctioned and impoverished, and then they can do the externalization work and detention centers for us. Within that, there's always, when you put a country under sanctions, you bring the worst out of people, and that tends to be the exploitation, the torturing, the ransom, and so forth. So if you are Libyan and Black, I mean, I don't want to sound like an oversimplified way. We've had a prime minister in the last couple of years who was Black. Black people in Libya exist as Libyans, but it's particularly the foreign Black Africans who are looked down upon given the context of Libya. And I highly recommend, don't just decontextualize my words or take the CNN report. It's actually, that CNN report has an intention of de-Africanizing Libya, saying Libya is so racist, Libya is so xenophobic, that any African who's Black goes to Libya, they're going to face that supposed open slave market. So please just be critical of that narrative. So this is one. The other one is you're asking about resistance to it. So I think it is more complicated to just say, is it being resisted or not? I think there are people who are saying that they're more looking at it from a human perspective. Migrants, refugees who are passing through Libya or coming to Libya to work, they should be respected and treated as equals to Libyans. And there's a push for that. And it's mostly from a human rights organizations that are Libyan and not funded by George Soros or anything like that. So when it comes to cognitive and psychological warfare, I want you to that term is being used particularly by NATO starting from 2021, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. They say that Russia and China do it, right? Obviously, the US and the West never do anything bad. It's always Russia and China. But I wanted to give you an example. In 2019, I believe, Ukraine had its power grid somehow shut down or broken down in Ukraine. And then there was a lot of swarm on social media saying, oh, look at how ineffective the current leadership of Ukraine, 5 years after the Maidan coup, that cannot even provide electricity to the people. So now you see how materially they have been compromised, the Ukrainians, but also psychologically, they are also the truth of the matter is that their electricity grid is being broken down because of the bad leadership. So even your belief system in your own country and the leadership of it gets undermined. Your perception of reality gets undermined. This is what NATO calls cognitive warfare. That is that they are taking essentially what Russia did. They called it Russia did cyber attacks on Ukraine. And this is what cognitive warfare is. It's different from psychological warfare. If I show you a poster or I write an article or something like that, where I'm using the language of kind of saying, well, can you believe that the US will ever do something bad? The US is good. And this is part of the media, radio, and propaganda. That's just general psychological warfare. Because it is when your own belief system gets questioned, when I present you with something that the reality in front of you, and I tell you that this is actually not the reality, right? And you start believing in something else. And so when I bring it back to the example of the Lego videos that Iran are producing, they are cognitive warfare in itself. And again, it's not that cognitive warfare is all bad, depends on how you weaponize it, right? They are saying, oh, look, Americans, your president is going and fighting this unnecessary war on behalf of the Epstein class. And then look at how the gas, when you go to the gas station, how much the gas costs. Right. So it's all laid out in facts, but the perception of it is that you are shifting from, oh, we need to promote democracy across the world as Americans, right? This is the perception, to, oh my God, my pockets are actually getting emptied because of this war. So I have more to say about it. I will try to drop some links in the chat shortly.
Thank you. That would be very important to do. And we have a whole slew of questions. I'm going to try to combine for Conrad, Maurice, several that he spoke to. First of all, if you could speak to what organizing dissent against AFRICOM and the other foreign powers has looked like. That's for Libya, but we're going to say for the DRC, for the Congo. And how did and maybe you want to start with this, Conrad, what Erik Prince partnership began, and how much impact does he have with the conflict in Congo currently?
Yeah, the partnership began 2 or 3 years ago, and it has deepened. You know, it's kind of interesting. It certainly has had an impact, as I shared with you in Uvira, in the east. It hasn't, and it's not just, I know we talk about Erik Prince and the Congolese government, but also you have the Arab Emirates, Qatar and United Arab Emirates, who Prince is in bed with and get a lot of his financing from as well. And those nations, just as they have in Sudan and other parts of Africa, have their interest in the Congo as well. So, and it's not just Erik Prince, but the U.S. intelligence, at least former U.S. intelligence community. Give you one example. There is a cobalt mine, copper and cobalt mine that copper and cobalt mine that the U.S. Congo had up for sale, and the Chinese offered, I think, about a little over $1 billion for it. But because United States, not initially under Biden and then under Trump, put pressure on the Congolese government not to sell to the Chinese, then what wound up happening is a collection of former CIA, former intelligence community representatives wound up getting the contract or getting the concession from the Congolese government for about a third of the price that the Chinese would have paid for it. So it's not solely Erik Prince, it's also members of the intelligence community. And all of this happens because of the leadership that's in place in Kinshasa. One of the questions that was raised was about resistance. We see resistance coming from the Congo from several quarters, primarily from the youth, challenging on different levels. For example, the partnership that Congo has with the United States, coming from young attorneys challenging it in the courts. You have young people mobilizing in Kinshasa to resist as well. I think y'all saw in 2025 where there were young people who rose up and started attacking embassies, U.S. embassy, other embassies in Kinshasa. So you have that kind of resistance, but it's not organized, not quite yet, in a way that would be, a strong anti-imperialist force that would challenge not only the neocolonial leadership but also foreign powers. So I think there's a long way to go in that type of organizing, that type of mobilizing, that type of resistance in the Congo, or coming out of the Congo.
Relatedly, this second question that seems connected, Maurice, what do you see as some of the continent and the diaspora's material levers on AFRICOM? Is it divestment targets, defense appropriation pressure, port and logistics labor? What are the most viable points to apply pressure?
You know, there's a prerequisite for that. As I shared in my presentation, going back to 2008, we've in one form or another, organizing Resist AFRICOM that has evolved through BAP into Shutdown AFRICOM. And what I think we can do a much better job of, Rose, is really a prerequisite to all of those elements that you just laid out, right? Those policy options and those actions. And that is actually political education. If we're not able to effectively educate the masses, educate the grassroots leaders, educate folks in our community, it makes it extremely difficult for us to mobilize and implement and get any of those policies, put pressure on whether it's the corporations, whether it's the different departments. I know BAP, for example, is mobilizing to put pressure on the Congressional Black Caucus. But since Cynthia McKinney left the Congressional Black Caucus, we haven't had an ally inside who can provide the space in which we can put pressure on Cynthia McKinney, for example, to organize hearings. She famously did a hearing looking at U.S. covert action in the Congo. Okay, so the lack of support within the Congressional Black Caucus, and then the not really reaching a critical mass as yet in educating people, whether it's in the district of the members that can put pressure on the members to hold up to a certain strain in their tradition, that Charles Diggs strain that would at least question U.S. foreign policy. So I think, right, even many years later, still the priorities got to be the political education, being in the churches, being with grassroots leaders, and educating them about the destructive nature of AFRICOM on the African continent. And I think that would provide the requisite, force for us to actually have some kind of concrete impact on policy, whether it has to do with government or with corporate policy.
Thank you for that. Essam, you mentioned the AES in your remarks, and this question is one that references them. It's how should we understand the AES project as a nonlinear process of sovereignty rather than a is actually one more than
Be careful, Pa. You don't need to do that.
All right. Are you seeing the question?
Yes, yeah, I see it.
Okay.
The Director of France has.
Why don't you go with that? You see, it's multi-pronged.
Yes. Okay, so I think there is sometimes a tendency amongst Western Marxists to think that there is a blueprint of how a revolution is done and how a revolution navigates the structures that it has, and the blueprint is just applies everywhere and it looks smoothly the same. I mean, if we look at the Russian Revolution, it was people who were outside of the country who did it, right? Like Lenin and Trotsky and everybody. So nobody would have predicted something like this to happen. The Libyan Revolution, 1969, similarly. The Alliance of Sahel States conditions, they are informed by the fact that, for example, Niger and Mali and Burkina Faso, they literally have different relations to France. Remember that Niger was collaborating not with the French military, was with the American one. So they were going through different form of foreign intervention in their country. So I see it as what historians call it the zigzag of a revolutionary struggle, and that is that we might expect them, for example, to be exactly like Thomas Sankara in the 1980s, but the conditions of Africa today are drastically different. Thomas Sankara was isolated in Burkina Faso, and then was assassinated Cote Ivoirian / French intelligence. So today I see that they're wiggling that with trying to leverage Chinese technology, Russian intelligence collaboration to fight the existence of the Islamic State. It's a necessity out of many years of French intervention. So that actually was destructive to the militaries in countries. So in my view, it is nonlinear. It's a zigzag, and they have, truly, in many ways, despite the recent taken place in Mali, they have truly tried to do a new form of political economy of confederation, such that they want to create this internal economic structure. What does that mean? Is that you will have, for example, lithium deposits in Niger going to be refined in the country. Gold, the same thing. So it's and in order to do that, they need to use the human and the social capital that those countries have to work collaboratively together. So if one would write the blueprint of how a revolution should be done, I don't think it would be able to apply it on AES, but it's rather the people of the Alliance Sahel state what they're going through zigzag of the revolution that they are getting there. So and it should be supported in my view, because they are really kicking the French out of the African continent, and they're very skeptical of the US too. So yeah.
Maurice, did you want to weigh on that at all, or that's good? Someone, Essam wanted you to lithium in Nigeria.
Yeah. So if you probably know that most of the lithium that France has, it comes from Niger, and so and the form of extractivism exists on much of the African continent. It's the raw extraction, such that there's no refining factories. All the surplus value, meaning when you extract something and you add, is done outside of the African continent. So what they have been working with Russian and also Chinese experts, science, is that how to indigenize all of these things. And I mean, speaking of AFRICOM, this is an alternative thing that not related to particularly the issue of Niger's lithium. They wanted Niger to export oil back in 24, I believe, through, sorry for the lack of geographic knowledge, precisely Gabon or Benin, I forgot which one. But I've written about it also in Black Agenda Report for Africa Liberation Day in 2024. And I cited the details there. So the pipeline that was built by China to export oil from Niger to a West African country, 2 days after the agreement was signed, and the plan was to commence AFRICOM travels to this said West African country, and then they threatened it somehow, such that they decided to blockade Niger and prevent that pipeline from happening. So we know that AFRICOM and the military, how they work through coercive diplomacy, is the same thing to economic sanctioning of those three countries. And then to answer the question about, for example, we're seeing simultaneously selective engagement with Washington geostrategic goals, America First Health MOU in Mali's case, in recognition of Morocco over Western Sahara. I think it's not every country that signed the MOUs, America First Health, they're actually doing the same thing. For example, Kenya completely sold out the people's data to health administration in the United States. The MOU in Mali is less of that. The second part is about Western Sahara. I actually don't know. I need to look it up how they recognize it. But remember that recently Mali and Algeria, they have kind of the entente that used to exist between them, and then they established relations. And they're both now, when they establish relations, that really angers Morocco, because Morocco wants to also balkanize a lot of the African continent. So I'll just stop there.
Thank you.
Rose,
I don't know if you heard that question about AES and wanted to weigh in on that. And then I wanted to, if there are any resources or links that you want to share, I've been intending to ask you that from your presentation, let us know or put them in the chat. But did you want to speak to the AES question? I don't know if you heard all of it.
just not all, but just a little bit. I think there are a few important features around the AES, structural features that's not often taken to consideration. That bodes well for their success. One in particular, I think it's so important for us to remember that the AES or the Liptako Gorma in particular is not a recent phenomena, right? The Liptako Gorma goes back to 1970, where you have Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso come together under an economic umbrella, so to speak. So that history that is now being manifested in a political union, a military union, has deep roots beyond the recent revolutionary advances that we've seen. And in addition to that, we see that the United Nations Development Fund had done a study entitled Soldiers and Citizens. They posted it on .org, and they surveyed some 5,000 or so people from the West African, the Sahel region. And in digging into to that research, what we see is this popular underpinning for leadership that we see being expressed in the leadership that is mobilizing around sovereignty, sovereignty over the resources, so that those resources could be benefit to the masses of Nigerians or Malians or Burkina Faso. So I think those are some really important structural factors that we take into consideration when looking at the AES, the historic roots coming from Liptako Gorma, and also the popular support that exists throughout those countries for the type of leadership stance that we see being expressed today.
Well, maybe we'll close out with this question. I think we've touched on all of them, and especially this one. It's an AFRICOM related question. How does AFRICOM relate with UN peacekeeping missions in Africa? Does it undermine it or work in cahoots?
Maybe I can take a go at that. The largest peacekeeping mission in the world is the UN mission in the east of the Congo. At its height, had about 20,000 soldiers or so that peacekeepers that were there, supposedly to keep the peace. But as we've seen that they've done anything but that over the years. And in fact, the Congolese have risen up and mobilized and called for the UN peacekeepers to leave, kicking them out of the Congo. They've been pretty much an independent operation in terms of UN states, right? UN member states participating in the peacekeeping mission, and AFRICOM hasn't had much of a role in that. However, those peacekeepers have come under attack from Rwanda in particular, and equipment that they get from the United States, equipment from Poland, equipment, intelligence that they get from Israel, Rwanda, that is, even China, all like surface-to-air missiles used against peacekeepers. In fact, Secretary General of the UN was lamenting how the UN peacekeepers were outnumbered, or not outnumbered, but outgunned rather, in the east of Congo. We saw that even there's a division of the UN peacekeepers, African division, called the Force Intervention Brigade, that brings in the likes of Tanzania and Malawi and South Africa. And even with those forces coming in 2023, 2024, they're also, smashed by the Rwandan military, with all the backing that it gets from outside. So we haven't seen AFRICOM either intervene or support the UN mission in the Congo. But what we have seen is it come under attack from neighboring countries, particularly Rwanda, drawing upon military equipment that it's gotten from the United States and really key partners from different parts of the world.
Thank you so much. It looks like we have a couple more questions. Look like they have emerged from the PE committee. Y'all have been very expansive in your answers, but I'll share both of them with you. Can you speak to how the tactics of neocolonialism are employed to maintain Western imperialism on the continent? How is this connected to a larger, broader history of colonial domination? So that's part one of it. And then this can include a discussion of hard power and soft power tactics they are employed by Western powers, as well as the role of compradors in national local leadership. Long question. Got it?
Did you want me to go
yeah,
first?
why don't you go, Conrad Maurice?
Well, I think in those questions, right, two dominant figures loom large, right, on opposite end of the spectrum. Because when we talk about neocolonialism, we're really talking about Nkrumah, right? Neocolonialism, last stage of imperialism, channeling Lenin's highest stage of imperialism. And so, I can hardly think of a better theoretical tool at our disposal for clearly assessing what is currently unfolding on the continent, right? And how we can respond to it. Because, we do a lot of engagement with average people, and they ask questions. They're like, Africans are in control now, so why is it that people are still poor? Why are they fighting it against each other? With all the gold and all of that, why aren't they, doing better, right? So that's a very real question that we get from people. So then we have to bring that, Nkrumah's analytical tool and explain to folks the theory behind neocolonialism and how this is the latest stage, really, of imperialism, and how how folks on the continent are combating it, and how we on the outside can be in solidarity with them as they combat this, their neocolonial leaders. What Frantz Fanon called the national bourgeoisie, or Thomas Sankara called, the agents of imperialism. It's so vital for us in our political education to bring that to the masses, because it is the masses that are going to be needed to support those who are smashing neocolonialism, the neocolonial framing, and those who are smashing imperialism, as we saw with the response, the welcome response, when the head of AFRICOM, Michael Langley, was criticizing Burkina Faso's leader, Ibrahim Traore, saying that he is, capturing the gold for his own personal use or for the use of the military and not for the masses. So that is really vital for us to bring Nkrumah into the discussion. The second figure that looms large in that question is, Joseph Nye, right? It is from Joseph Nye, the American theorist, the intellectual who produces work for the underpinning and maintenance of imperialism, right? It's Nye who talks about hard power, soft power, and then, you know, Hillary Clinton and her crew try to bring into the equation what they call smart power, but it's still the same thing. It's tools, and this is instructive for us too. That's why Nkrumah is so powerful, because you see how the intellectual infrastructure, the universities and the think tanks and the research institutions come up with theories to justify full spectrum domination on the part of the empire. And soft power is one of the theoretical tools that Joseph Nye offered to the empire. If any of you have seen soundtrack to a coup d'etat, you get a glimpse into how soft power has been used through Black music. In this case, it was jazz, and continues to be used today through the music that you know, Black people produce as the most you know, powerful vehicle that the empire has is our culture, right? And they use our culture to dominate the you know, the rest of the world. And it's through that soft power, through our music, through Hollywood, through movies. You know, a lot of our people, we went out. Another classic example is a lot of our people, you know, went out and they're like, they're supporting Black Panther, and they're like, oh, it's the dopest thing ever. And they're like, you know, Wakanda and Congo is Wakanda, Africa is Wakanda, and all of that. But throughout the whole movie, we see the Black Panther in bed with the CIA, right? So it, you know, soft, you know, I even got into arguments with people, like, they're like, why are you taking it so seriously? You know, like, why are you talking? It was a good movie. Why are you bringing up the CIA? Well, because the CIA was embedded in there for put you to sleep, you know, as Malcolm would say, so you could suffer peacefully. You won't question it, right? So this element of soft power is so crucial. That's why I'm so grateful for brothers and sisters who are engaging our musicians, getting them to be a part of, you know, in the spirit of Amilcar Cabral, using the culture as a weapon, you know, in our battle against neocolonialism and imperialism. So those two figures are key on opposite spectrum. And Nkrumah, you know, with his work that in the 1960s published work, and then of course Joseph Nye with his theory. And so we need to draw up on the theory of Nkrumah in resisting both the hard power and the soft power, and Hillary Clinton's smart power on the continent.
Oh, excellent, excellent. You want to speak to that question, Essam?
Yes, I'll try to be brief, but excuse me if I go a bit theoretical here. There is this notion that sometimes you have leaders of a country being puppets of Western governments. So you see like a direct connection between one and the other, which is tends to be the neo-colonial leaders on the African continent. It has transformed in recent years such that the society itself becomes what I call functionary of imperialism. And what does a functionary mean? A functionary is if they know that they're doing it on behalf of the empire or not. So a lot of the times when you have people, for example, who are regurgitating CIA talking points in a third world country, people say, oh, you sound like you're an agent, you're getting paid by whatever, the Mossad or whatever, right? But sometimes people are actually doing it without knowing that they are servicing the empire. Their role is try to compartmentalize the connection between a CIA operation, the headquarters from Pentagon or whatever, to how the Libyans themselves are doing things on behalf of the empire. Such that when you have Libyans, they're doing something on behalf of the empire, people will say, well, they have agency, they have control of their own fate, they're doing this thing. But in reality, it is in service of imperialism, hence they become a functionary. And so that term functionary has you can apply it on states, how certain states are functionaries of US imperialism, how certain actors who write online and go on appearances and regurgitate imperialist talking points. This is, I think, one of my key goals in the future is the tangent is to actually develop this concept and publish it somewhere so people understand how it operates in much of the third world, where there's a lot of imperialist interventions, direct or indirect. So when it comes to that, direct and indirect, the question of soft power and hard power, I'm going to go back to Michael Parenti, who recently passed away in February. And I wrote it with a great friend of his and mine, Barry Litucci, an obituary on Pambazuka News, and I just posted it in the chat. And I highlight that the term soft power and hard power actually was not from Joseph Nye. And Joseph Nye only explained it in this simplified way, such that the US either goes and bombs a country or does these all cultural programs of learning English or civic education programs, study abroad, exchange, and so forth. But what Michael Parenti calls is the sword and the dollar. How is it a country able to do the soft power? Can, for example, Libya do soft power? Can Tunisia do soft power? A lot of people who go into this soft power analysis is that they say, well, anybody could do it, right? But the reality is that it is backed by the US dollar itself. Hence, when Michael Parenti called his book, and before Joseph Nye came up with the term, he called it the sword and the dollar. The dollar is how you bankroll all these propaganda campaigns, cultural kind of influences that the US tries to do. And then he says sometimes you need to, because in my view, I think one of the most Marxist institutions is the CIA, because they know what conjunction is. They know when to intervene and how to intervene. They understand the material conditions of the people. And so they merge together sometimes soft and hard power at the same time, and produces what also Joseph Nye and Hillary Clinton and so forth call smart power, right? When those two coalesce. But if we look at what Michael Parenti, whose work has been intentionally sidelined by the empire's intellectual production and industry of knowledge production because of how feisty he was, really shows how it operates, this notion of sword and dollar, be it from the 1980s up to the present. And so, yeah, may he rest in peace. So I just want to say that. Thanks.
Thank you for that. We're going to close out with, and both of you have already touched upon portions of this last question in terms of your articulation. But it reads thusly: how do you understand the role of the Western capitalist class, corporations, multi-millionaires, and billionaires in our confrontation with Western imperialism? And then what about the petty bourgeoisie? Of course, this theme in your last response is woven through, but I'm wondering if you want to speak directly to that, and we can close out on that. Y'all have done more than your fair share.
So I guess I can start, and I'll be very brief. I think today we see kind of a great emergence that is very clear from the inauguration of Donald Trump, that you have Apple, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, everybody, all the billionaires going and attending his inauguration, and all of them are working together with the military, with every single thing that the United States foreign policy tries to do. There's a whole kind of cohesion of this constellation of billionaires, their tech industries, and also the US empire, how it is, though people can debate this if it's collapsing or expanding, but I think how it has been operating in recent years, not necessarily under Trump only, but since, war on terror. And I think the multi-billionaires, they have their existence as part of the facade up front with the politics, is that they give the illusion of people in the third world capitalism actually works, that, oh, look at these people, they pull themselves. For example, you can be the next billionaire, just work extra hours and you'll come up with Tesla or whatever. So I think they have a functional role, those billionaires, to pretend that this is what capitalism does. It creates wealth and creates creativity and so forth. But these billionaires wouldn't be billionaires if the US does not give them the contract. So it's still most of the wealth that they have done, they took it from the tax-paying citizens and also international students, myself, who pay taxes in this country. That's how they got their wealth. So just to clarify that. And their role has been detrimental to the African continent, and they will continue to be detrimental to us because that's how their model is taxation. The Starlink web hosting services and so forth that they provide, like Elon Musk, to stir up. It's all about data accumulation. The same with Mark Zuckerberg on Facebook, Meta, Instagram, and so forth. So very devilish creatures, those people.
And their military connection, which takes us back to AFRICOM. Yeah. Any final word on the Q&A, Maurice?
Yeah, I would concur with Essam. If you you look at just this competition that we see, quote unquote competition. It's not really a competition, where the U.S. is in a mad scramble to secure its critical mineral supply chain, right, for its commercial sector and its war sector, and at the same time combat the Chinese. We see a few things happening. One, Sam is right. It's the U.S. taxpayers' dollars that are out front, whether it's through the Export-Import Bank, talking of tens of billions of dollars, or through its International Finance Development Corporation, in order to secure these minerals from whether it's from Indonesia, Congo, Malaysia, you name it. Close in tow are the billionaire class. It's like the United States paves the way. And if you take the Congo, for example, you have Jeff Bezos, you have Bill Gates, you have Michael Bloomberg, Elon Musk. They're all there to gobble up the lithium, gobble up the cobalt, gobble up the copper. So they're in tow with the U.S. government, U.S. military in particular, and to the detriment of the masses of Africans, and especially as we quote unquote move into the so-called fourth industrial revolution, artificial intelligence. It's not solely a question of the mineral resources, but it's also a question of the data and collecting the data that populates their artificial intelligence infrastructure. On every conceivable level, the government in tow with the billionaire class are in that hot pursuit. Unfortunately, I don't think African governments are yet up to speed in terms of where this is all heading and how they could protect their data sovereignty, which is one of the I think the biggest threat out there right now for us, really Africans at home and Africans abroad.
Thank you all so much for your incredible responses. And we're going to turn it back over to Conrad Dennis.
Thank you very much, Rose. That was a fantastic segment. So many just great questions. I was writing a lot. Thankfully, this is recorded, so we'll be able to go back to it. So we'd like to, as we come to the end of this session, we'd like to give each of you about 3 minutes for closing remarks, just to kind of situate us as we move into this series. We have 5 sessions left. Our next session is going to be a Understanding AFRICOM in Context, with an overview of AFRICOM, NATO, U.S. imperial strategy in Africa. So if you, Maurice, how about you start taking us out, and then we'll hand it over to Essam.
Yeah, thank you all so much for jumping on the move here, but thank you for inviting us to participate yet again. I would certainly encourage everyone on to join us. Kick off October 1st. AFRICOM month of action. We, as I shared before, I think there's so much more that we can do in terms of political education with students, faith leaders, grassroots leaders. So it would be an appeal to people. No one is holding it down like the Black Alliance for Peace in terms of its efforts to shut down AFRICOM, in terms of its efforts to educate people about U.S. military dominance on the African continent. So use my last few minutes, the last few seconds to make that appeal for everyone on to join after the month of action, AFRICOM month of action in October, and bring people in to become aware, to be educated, with the expectation that they'll go out taking actions that BAP has laid out. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Maurice. Essam, if you could take us out, please. Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure if many of the attendees, if not all, are members of BAP, but I encourage you to join Black Alliance for Peace, get involved with them. And the key three things from political organizing is that you come from a position of knowing that everybody is ignorant and you should be learning as much as you can all the time. Never say that I've learned enough, I'm not going to attend this webinar session, I know enough, I'm not going to attend this popular education session. Just try to attend as much as possible. That's first thing. Talk to people, agitate them. And the third thing that the empire, remember, always tries to strive for is the vision. Right. So what they want us to think is that if there is a police station being built in Georgia, it's a police station in Georgia. This is it. But what is behind it is a cop city, right? And who's behind it? Who's training them? It's design, it's the IDF, right? So I try to establish a connection such that when we are acting, we're acting with political consciousness, with values of shared commonalities and shared goals. So I commend the work of Black Alliance for Peace, and thank you so much for inviting me for this first session. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Essam. Thank you again, Maurice. And next session is going to be next Sunday. We are going to again focus on understanding AFRICOM context. And we're going to do an overview of AFRICOM, NATO, and U.S. imperial strategy in Africa. It's going to be fantastic to come back. And we're going to be doing this each Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern time through 7th. If you're here already in this webinar, you're good to go. You've been registered for all the other sessions. On one of the live streams on various platforms, we're going to the link in chat and make sure you sign up so you can get into these. We have a lot of fantastic going through. We're going to really be kind of trying to these understandings, this analysis, this theory, and also too, this will be recorded. We will also be sending out the slides, Essam slides, and all the other resources that we have for this one to make sure that we ground ourselves so that we can move together cohesively and precisely to end the war on African people here and abroad. Thank you very much again for joining us. Greatly appreciate you. No comment, no retreat.
واستيقظ